Let me say also, while Tammy's gathering questions, that we do this every week. I do this at 5 o'clock California time. And then on Fridays, I'm on the intherooms.com, which is a 12-step play spot online at 6 p.m. California time. And just in case you didn't notice, you're not paying anything. We're doing this really as an opportunity to do service, to let people have answers to questions. I know for me, when I was going through my early healing and recovery, there were so many really amazing professionals that I wanted to talk to and ask questions of, but I didn't have the resources to see them professionally. I couldn't afford their fees, and mostly they were on the road or conferences, or, I really believe that you deserve an opportunity to ask an expert questions without having to pay for it, without having to search the world for it. So I'm on twice a week just to be able to answer whatever questions you have around sex, love, and addiction, around intimacy disorders and attachment related to addiction, and of course, sex and porn addiction. I've been doing this work about 25 years. I am a recovering sex addict. I may not have all the answers, but between me and Tammy, we're pretty good at pointing in the right direction.
So the first question is, is the podcast hasn't been updated in a while. Is there a new episode coming?
I see. Well, that's just, wow. So you got me. I think we did a podcast last week. I did one last weekend with Dr. Fawcett, and I do really want to do one myself. I just have not had. So I'll tell you what's not happening. I know that there are people. My niece started a podcast. I don't tell on her, okay? And she was really all excited about it. And she realized she had to do 5 or 6 before she could actually launch it, and she gave up. And so I knew she was never going to make it for the long distance. So we're at about 45 podcasts, but I do get distracted sometimes from keeping them rolling out. And really it's because we've been opening treatment programs and starting to actually work with folks. And it's just been, I haven't had as much time. But
he has scheduled several, so there will be more coming. But I'm going to go back to, because nobody's asking questions. I can't believe it. So why don't you tell them a little bit about what you have been doing, which is opening the treatment center?
Well, first I'll mention the podcast. We have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And I started it last summer. We have about 45 podcasts. We're now a top 10 addiction podcast in the United States. I think the reason is that we have meat on that bone. I'm inviting people who are extraordinary experts in attachment, in relationship disorders, in infidelity, in addiction. People that I've admired all my life are suddenly jumping on my podcast and talking to me. So I've got Harville Hendricks and Sue Johnson and all these really amazing therapists who you may or may not know, but I got to tell you, they're really good at what they do. And I'm very honored to have them. We're going to get Dr. Drew to come on. I know we've been talking about that, and a couple other great people. So the podcast is free. Sit in the car and listen. I do recommend it if you want to learn more about these topics. We've also started to open treatment programming around the US, and we're starting here in California where I live. But we will be doing 2-week intensive and 4-week programs, both for sex addicts and for those people who struggle with combined sex and drug problems. And for some people, those problems can be really fused together in a whole variety of ways. I've been running treatment for almost 30 years, and I've seen a lot of reasonable good treatment. I've seen a lot of excellent treatment. I've seen a lot of bad treatment. And what I'd like to do, at least as I end my career, is try to train a whole bunch of really extraordinary therapists how to do great work, and then give them a little push and let them do it. And that's what we're putting together now. And thanks for your help, Tammy.
I want to go back to the podcast because not only is it experts in the field, it's also topical. So like you recently recorded one on the topic of disclosure. So we often get asked a lot of questions about disclosure. So there's information that pertains to a particular topic. It may not be someone that you know as well or are as familiar with, but they are addressing this particular topic. So please do go check them out. Like he said, there's 45 of them. So there's a lot of good information. So here's a question. Are there any psychological themes that are behind the Conquest essay? My SA spouse took the SDI. That was the outcome. Also networking for anonymous sex.
I don't know the Conquest. Is that like an online program or some kind? I'm not really familiar.
No, on the SDI, it's one of the identified.
That part of the Conquest. I'm thinking like, is there a club called the Conquest I've never heard of? Or
I figured out what she was talking about. So it's that particular type of sex addict.
And what about that particular type of sex addict?
So she's saying, are there any psychological themes that are behind that type of sex addict? My spouse took the SDI. This was the outcome. Also networking for anonymous sex.
I think there's absolutely something about, for sex addicts, about being certain sex addicts, about being able to convince someone to do something that they didn't necessarily intend to do or want to do. And that is on the way to sexual offending, because when you sexually offend, you're truly doing something sexually that someone doesn't want to do, and you're going to do it anyway. And that's sexual offending, no consent. But sex addicts are often pushing the boundary to, well, they say no, but maybe if I say this, maybe if I say it like that, maybe if I sit a little closer, and there's always, although I don't believe that we like to overtly test boundaries, we don't openly push you in ways that would be clear necessarily across the room, but the language used, the way we sit, what we have to say, what we're wearing, we're pushing. And yeah, there is absolutely a more intense high and excitement for the person who's kind of gotten someone who didn't want to be gotten. And I think healthy men and women engage in conquest kind of behavior. If you've ever been an adolescent looking for a date, you're probably like that. But sex addicts do it over and over and over again. They're not just looking for one conquest. They're looking for the experience of the conquest. It isn't that they want to go through that and then find the person. They just want to keep doing it. And, it speaks to a lot of insecurity. It speaks to a lot of emptiness. It speaks to a lot of desperation to be validated no matter what. I don't know the person, but there's lots of stuff behind conquest. And it is, does lean into the offending world, because that is absolutely ultimately what offenders are doing, is they are taking people to do things with them, whether that person wants them to or not.
I learned that even while my husband was in your program, he was still lying. I just found this out as he told me. Could he be one of those unfortunates? When do you think SA men give it up, or are those that just never do?
Well, I don't know you, so I have no idea this is, which is good, because I can't speak about their partner or what they did in treatment. I absolutely believe that we will always struggle with the truth on some level. That when facing an angry partner, we will retreat and try to make it look good. And we're not as brave as we look. We're actually quite afraid, most sex addicts, of rejection, quite afraid of being found out as having done something to hurt you or let you down, or something like that. So lying, I think, is very typical to the process. Most of the time we figure out what's going on in treatment, and it isn't necessarily each individual lie that matters so much as the larger picture of who this person is. They may continue lying for a very long time. My expectation of clients, especially when they've been through treatment and they know this, and I will say to them, look, I expect that you're probably going to continue lying, because lying is what you do, but could you say, I may lie to you, but within 36 hours or 24 hours, I will come back and tell the truth. I think that would be a reasonable expectation of a spouse, that, if you're angry and you found something and you're going at us, that we may say that never happened, because that's what we do, unfortunately, but that we will come back to you and say, remember when you were angry yesterday, I wasn't really ready to be truthful with you. In other words, I don't know that we're always able to be truthful in the moment, but if we're committed to being truthful, then we will make sure that happens, and we're willing to take the consequences. It's just in the moment, we're not always ready to deal with it. And that's just how we are.
Is there a link between testosterone, sex drive, and sex addiction? Is my thinking of sex a lot of the time being male or a sex addict? Where's the line? I'm not quite sure what's normal urges and what's addiction.
Well, addicts, let me explain addiction then. Sex addiction is about the constant pursuit of the intensity of some sexual high or some sexual distraction as a means of soothing yourself, calming yourself, or escaping reality. Sex addicts will act out sexually with porn or another person when they are having a bad day and they don't know how to tolerate feelings that they don't like and they want to get rid of those feelings. Sex addicts will act out when they're having a great day and they want to celebrate and they want to put icing on the cake. In other words, any strong emotional experience that person can't tolerate or hasn't learned how to manage, they will spin off into sexual intensity and disappear into it as a means of handling that situation. It's interesting that you ask about testosterone, because you would think that perhaps sex addicts have higher testosterone because we have a lot more, seem to have more sex drive. But when you really look at what we're doing, it isn't about sex. What we're looking for is validation, approval. We're looking to be wanted, to be desired, to feel important, to feel special, to feel like we have control over people who want us. The sex, when you talk to most sex addicts, well, it's the driving idea and fantasy. The actual playing out of the sex not such a big deal or often not even that great. It's not about, sex addiction is not about sex. It's about the pursuit of sex, the fantasy about sex, and our absolute belief that the sex is going to make me feel better or not feel. Neither of which is particularly healthy, to use sex to do that.
So the next question, my husband is a sex addict. Oops, it slid, sorry. Is a sex addict newly in recovery, and we have joint married friends where I'm much closer to the wives than he is with the husbands. I'm wondering what is the best way to share what we're going through without, it doesn't say, I think probably without making it worse or more difficult.
Well, I don't know if I can answer that specific question, but I'll answer it in a general way. I just want to say this to you, what you say about your sex life or what your husband has or hasn't done will never leave the minds of the people you tell it to. So just know that if you tell 3 of your friends and they're the ones who come over at Christmas time and spend holidays with you, and they're the ones who you spend a lot of time with and are really important to you, and then you're going to have to face, and he's going to have to face the reality that they know what he's done, and every time you see him. This is why I don't recommend telling your mom or necessarily your sister or perhaps, and certainly not your kids, because they're going to look at that guy every day and see him as his dad, and they don't need to see him as someone who's cheated. You don't necessarily want to involve his family, for example, because he needs to have a relationship with his family where they're not being asked to take sides and, all of that kind of stuff. So, I absolutely believe that partners need to be heard, and you need a community, and you need support, and you need people to talk about this with. I would just caution you that whoever you tell, they may tell, you have to really know they're not going to tell other people. You have to try, I wouldn't tell the people I play cards with or the people I, occasionally go invite over for dinner. One of the ways I explain it to the clients is that we have sort of various layers of how we reveal ourselves. So if I were struggling with my sex addiction and I needed to take some time out for treatment or something, or I had to move out for a while I would probably say something to someone I didn't know that well, like, I've been struggling with some issues. My spouse and I have been having some issues. I need to take some time out and really work on myself. I wouldn't talk about it in a direct way. With someone I knew better, I might say, well, me and Mary or me and Joe or my husband and I, my wife and I, we're really having some serious problems, and, we're really trying to work through them, and it's very hard, and there's a lot of pain and suffering, but I think we're going to make it, and it really is only to the person who's deeply in my inner world, who is my friend that I'm leaning into, who I know is not going to betray me or betray me to her husband, betray me to all the other guys, but really just be the person I'm talking to who's there for me. That's the person that I may tell. But I absolutely agree with you. It's like with kids. A lot of times sex addicts have children, and there's a major upset in the home, and you guys are saying, well, I can't hide this from my kids, nor should you. You just don't need to tell them what it's about. Mom and dad are struggling. Mom and dad are fighting. Dad has really let mom down. He's done some things that are pretty upsetting. We're having to work, absolutely all of the language of what's going on without the detail. I think there are many ways to get the support and love of other people without necessarily having to go into the sexual detail of what's happened. But if you need to talk about it, you talk about it. And if you don't have anyone else to talk about it with, then you talk about it with those women, because it is more important that you get support somewhere than you not talk about it.
And I'm going to invite you to be on the drop-in groups for betrayed partners, because that's a safe place where you can talk about it. So there's multiple options. Sunday night, Angela Spearman has at 6 p.m. Pacific time. There's a betrayed partner group. There's one on Wednesday afternoons. We're adding more.
Tammy, where are these groups?
On sex and relationship healing. If you haven't already registered, I'd invite you to do that so you're notified. We keep adding things to the lineup. So if you want to be in the know, register.
And I want you guys to understand why we're doing this. I'm a social worker by training, and my work in my belief system extends beyond the person who can pay me or has insurance. But I have to live, and I have to survive, and I have to pay the people who work with me. So how can I help more people that can't necessarily afford to come to us or don't have the resources to talk to someone like me or us? And the answer is we can give it away for free, with the resources that we get from doing treatment and the work that we do. We're able to manage and have a site that we can give away for people. So those people who can't afford therapy, those people who not going to get to a therapist, those people who are too ashamed to go into a 12-step meeting or whatever it is, we have groups for you. Men's drop in, women's drop in, partners drop in, male and female. And the only reason we're doing this is because it's service for us. It gives us an opportunity to be able to help people without having to have every single person come through our office and pay a fee. And because there are people who will do that, and they will help pay for everything else. That is our philosophy. So that's why we're here.
Well, and you added a lot of reasons, but there are people that have little kids that they can put them to bed, and then they can go to a meeting with headphones on, so you can listen without the kids hearing. So the podcast that you mentioned earlier, I had somebody that commented that they listen to a podcast anytime they're even thinking about relapsing. They throw in a podcast. Well, that's 24/7. Those are available, and you could listen to all of those multiple times and pick out some new nugget in every single one of them. There's so much great content in there. So. Ready for the next one?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. This is from a male partner. My spouse just recently gave me the disclosure, and it doesn't say if it was, it doesn't sound like it was in a therapeutic setting. It says it was horrible, but 2 questions. Should I have a polygraph concerning that? And 2, she says she can't find a female sponsor, and I don't feel comfortable with that. Is that wrong? So let's start with the first one. Horrible disclosure and the polygraph.
I think that polygraphs are the territory of a formal therapeutic disclosure that's done with a therapist present. So if you have been working in therapy and she's been working in therapy and you've gotten together and you've done this in a therapeutic setting and you feel that she's lied to you so many times in the past that you really can't believe what she's saying now fully, you can get a polygraph and you can work that out with a therapist in a therapeutic setting. Should you on your own as a partner go out and get a polygrapher and do a polygraph with your wife? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's fair. I don't think you're the right person to do that. But if you work with a professional, and Tammy and I can recommend you people all over the country who understands how to work through disclosure. First of all, you may not need a polygraph because you go through it with a professional and you may find a lot of your questions get answered in a way that you hadn't expected. My experience with doing a disclosure without a therapist, it can often sound like this, like, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, I didn't know I was an addict, and I did all these things, I'm hoping you can forgive me, and that's all just crap. Like, that's a waste of time. That's not the point of it. The point of it is to simply give you the factual information about what happened that you didn't know about. And the disclosure is not an apology. It's not a plea for forgiveness. It is simply an acknowledgement that things happened, and this is what happened. And if we're going to stay together as a couple and we're going to be intimate, I don't want to have secrets on the table between us. So this is everything. If you're with me, you know everything that's happened. And it's an opportunity for the couple to go forward with somewhat of a clean slate in terms of secrets and hidden agendas and all that. If you don't believe your partner is telling you the truth, then I would suggest you engage a therapist who is knowledgeable in this work and proceed with a professional. If you are seeing a professional, or you both are, you can ask for a polygraph as a part of that work. And if they don't know what they're doing and they say, a polygraph? Call us up. We'll refer you to someone who understands how to do this work, and you can do your couples work with them.
And he did indicate that it was therapeutic, so that is good.
What was the next? Well, there was a second part of the question.
The second part of it is she says she can't find a female sponsor, and I don't feel comfortable with that.
Okay, so. You are dead right. It is completely unacceptable. It would be unacceptable to me, and I can completely understand it being unacceptable to you that she look around and have a male partner, a male spouse, a male sponsor. I don't care if he's gay. I don't care what he is. And I'll tell you why. It isn't so much. I don't have the same fears that you do. I mean, I would imagine your fears are her. She's going off and telling secrets to a man, and I'm the man in her life. And my fears are more about her primary job in recovery right now is to develop deep, enduring, meaningful relationships with women. Your partner's job, this woman that you're married to, has a deficit in her life, and that is good, solid female relationships that support and guide her. So when I think about where she needs to turn and where she needs to look and where she needs to go, it is straight in the arms of non-sexual supportive women who are also struggling with these issues, who will be there for her. And if she can't find a sponsor where you live, there are SAA meetings and SLA meetings online, on the phone, all over the world. And she can find an online sponsor if that's what she needs to do. There are lots of women. Drop into my group In the Rooms on Friday night. You can come as a couple, by the way. And I don't know, Tammy, did you know that? But I don't know about this room, but when I do In the Rooms, there's a number of couples who come in together. And they have questions
This
asked
too.
of other couple.
Yeah. No, there is.
Sometimes it's a spouse wants to say, I know he's going to say this and you need to hear it. Sometimes it's an addict who says, I know that, same thing, but oftentimes they're just really learning together. And I think that's a really lovely thing to do. And very intimate, by the way.
Well, and we have a female sex and love addict and female sex, love, and porn addict drop-in group on Tuesday nights. And so they can find a sponsor in that group as well. So there are definitely opportunities to find a female sponsor. So, but I'm with you. Okay. Next one. In all the literature I've been reading about love addiction, I can't recall anyone ever discussing polyamory. 3 years ago, my serial cheating husband found a woman on a dating website who told him she was a polyamorous. This lifestyle, in quotes, introduced my husband to a whole community of women that were willing to overlook the fact that he was married because he told them he was a polyamorous as well, and simply hadn't had the courage to bring up the topic with his wife.
Oops.
Or that I was closed-minded. When he was caught 2 years ago, he presented me with this title as an excuse or something I needed to consider in order to save our relationship. I had never heard of polyamory before, or only polygamy, and all the Google hits pointed me to websites on how to do it correctly and how great it was, etc. Today, now we know that he's actually a sex and love addict, which I also had never heard of before this year. Can you talk about polyamory for those
Sure.
who might not have ever heard of it? And perhaps this should be a red flag for betrayed spouses, that this is something that addicts can be hiding behind.
Oh, yeah. I think your husband, the word I would use for your husband, I hope he's not online tonight, but the word is asshole. That's the word, not polyamorous, at least in how he's treated you. And you'll know that because I'm a straight shooter. I don't pull punches, as everybody will tell you. And the reason is that, I hear a lot of so we're in a period now, not unlike the late 1960s, early 1970s, where young people are doing a lot of experimenting sexually. And we haven't seen this in 30, 40 years. We went through the AIDS and post-AIDS period, and a lot of sexual sort of going back to really people being much more cautious around their sexuality. But since the internet, and since internet porn, and since internet in the last 10 or 12, 15 years, we've seen young people you've seen a lot more people talk about gender fluidity. A lot more people feel they have permission to not necessarily have to be a man or be a woman, but they could be something in between. You see a lot more acceptance and discussion of what we would have called 20 years ago unusual or different kinds of sexual behavior. And as a result, and by the way, I'm not saying any of this is bad, because if single young people want to experiment with their sexuality, good for them, as long as they feel comfortable and safe. However, I have worked with women who've told me, well, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. And now this isn't your story, but it's close enough. I've worked with a bunch of young women who say, I'm dating this guy and he's really, really sweet, but I really like him, but he wants to have sex with other women and he says he's polyamorous. And I don't know what to do with this because I'm not polyamorous. Well, let me explain polyamory. The word means multiple love or many loves, right? Polyamory, multiple loves. It doesn't say, it's not polysexery, it's polyamory. Polyamory is very specifically about someone who has deep, romantic, loving feelings toward more than one person that are reciprocated. So someone could be polyamorous and they love two people, and maybe those two people love them back, and maybe the three of them live together and they have a wonderful polyamorous relationship. Good for them. They all love each other. They're all happy together. They all enjoy each other. I know a bunch of threesomes who have become, I want to say couples, that doesn't make sense, but threesomes who have become a unit. And it's not my job as a therapist to judge good, bad, right, or wrong. But polyamory is the pursuit of love, meaningful love relationships, not sex. So if your husband is having casual sex or affairs with other women and saying that it's polyamory, that's what makes him an asshole. Because polyamory is something you would have learned about when you first started dating. He would have said, I've often been in love with more than one person. You might have said, me too. You would have had these conversations. It sounds to me like he found a word that fit him well enough to explain what he was doing without having to say he was doing something bad or hurtful to you. Because if it's polyamory, then, oh, well, it's just a thing, right? And you should accept it. No, you don't have to accept it. And you know, just like I do, that he's just lying. Now, if he came to you and said, I deeply love you, and I've met this person at work and we've been friends for years, and I think I deeply love her too, and I want to find a way to make that might be maybe something, and he's telling you because he doesn't want to leave you and wants to be with you, but he also wants to have, that might maybe be the hints of something polyamorous. But to go ahead and do these things for years and not tell you, and then all of a sudden he has a new name for it that makes him feel more comfortable, no. Polyamory is the conscious pursuit of multiple love relationships. And there may not be any sex in that situation, by the way.
Well, and I find it really unfair that she's closed-minded because she's not willing to do this. It's like all the rules changed and you're closed-minded because you aren't embracing all of this.
Well, this is a classic, in my opinion, example of gaslighting, where you genuinely don't feel comfortable with something, and it's not something that was ever brought up to you in initiating your relationship. And now all of a sudden you're supposed to be comfortable with it. Oh, and since you're not comfortable with it, you're a drag and you're conservative and it's like, wait a minute, but I didn't buy into, I didn't marry you. This isn't, so you get blamed for just being you, the same you were all along, because your partner has changed the game and now they're throwing it at you. And that's very typical gaslighting, making you crazy. Like, what's wrong with me that maybe I should accept this. Maybe I should go along with this. Maybe it is okay. It's not okay because it's not okay with you. And that makes it not okay because you're married to this person. So, but this is a way that addicts gaslight, is they try to convince a partner that what they're doing is okay, and the partner should just be willing to, they're too square, or they're too this, or they're too that, and they should just go along with it. And that's how partners end up feeling really crazy. Like, I love this person, maybe I should be going along with it. No, no, you don't have to at all. Anyway. That's a little bit of that. Someone got very happy around that answer.
Yeah, somebody commented that you're right on the mark. The exact same thing happened to me, gaslighting. So, okay, so the next one, thank you for this platform. My partner is a sex addict that has been in recovery for 4 months. He originally cheated once, and I thought it was a one-time slip-up, but then it happened again 3 years later in our relationship. Then he admitted he had been cheating on every partner that he's ever been with before our relationship, and has a porn addiction as well. Oh. We're both fairly young. I'm in my late 20s, and he just turned 30. I'm having a hard time deciding on to stay or go, even though he has been taking recovery very seriously, therapy weekly, and attending 12-step meetings 3 times a week. I've been told to wait a year or so to see how seriously he takes recovery. It takes time. Do you have any advice on how partners can work through making decisions based on the shock shock?
We don't know how long they've been together. So that's she said she's in her 20s and he's in his 30s. But part of the question I would have is, have you been together for 3 years or 3 months? That makes a difference. But I can tell you in general, just a little take on this. So
6 years altogether.
Okay. So that's a long time. So I'll give you the whole picture. It might take a minute. I've been doing a lot of, I did a podcast with a friend of mine named Dr. Stan Tatkin recently. And Dr. Tatkin, Tatkin, writes a lot about relationships and why we have them, what are they for, and what is a relationship all about. And he wrote this really great book, which I would recommend, called We Do. We do. And it's like, I do, like getting married, but it's really about why we do. Why do we have relationships? What is the purpose? How do they serve? And he's talking about romantic relationships. And one of the points he makes, and it's in the podcast, and I really love this, is that we have relationships because we're happier in them. We're more successful in them. We live longer in them. In other words, those of us who have relationships do better. All the research tells us that, right? We're happier, we live longer, we have more successful careers. Happy relationships make happier people. So, of course, we want to be in a relationship because most of us are going to do better. If you find a relationship where you get along with someone, you actually like the things they do, you can tolerate them. Most of the time, you kind of enjoy each other. If you've been dating a while, what you'll know about that is that's actually kind of rare. It's hard. It is hard to find someone you genuinely get along with, enjoy, feel that you're at the same place in life, and have a lot to share. There are people that you may love for sex. There are people whose minds you may love, but putting the whole thing together and having a relationship, that's hard. All of you know that. And so, when I find somebody who I truly enjoy and really think I want to spend time with a lot of time, or I hear you guys talking about that, it's hard for me to just say, well, move on. I mean, it's easy for people to say move on when they're not the person who loves the person. So I understand that you're really saying, like, do I want to be in this for the long term? And I cannot answer that question for you, but I can give you this information. There are couples that we work with that don't stay together. And most often, in my experience, they're the couples that have had the least amount of time living together or being together. They don't have kids. They're not married. They haven't bought a house yet. And under those circumstances, when you, the partner, sees some really serious signs of emotional and psychological trouble ahead, he's been lying to me. He has some compulsive behaviors. He's been keeping secrets. He did things he didn't talk about, all of this. And it's starting to come out. You have to it does beg the question, do I want to be with this person? Not because of what they did. I mean, that's a question unto itself. Can I live with what's happened? But there's the other question, which is, how will I ever know I can trust him? How will I ever know that we can grow closer? What happens when I have kids or I'm distracted? Am I going to have to worry about where he is and what he's doing? And so really, the answer to your question is not an easy one, because I know a lot of partners who've said, I love this man or I love this woman, and I am willing to, I understand their vulnerabilities and their challenges and their problem with this. And it's going to hurt me probably more than once in my time with them, but I'm willing to go through that with them because I love them. And I think ultimately there's a lot here that I want to be here for. And by the way, their friends say that and their families say that. In other words, this person isn't just seeing someone in isolation, it's working, I know people who say, I love you dearly. We've had an amazing ride, but I'm 27 years old and I don't want to be in a situation like this the rest of my life. I don't want to be with someone who is going to struggle with intimacy, who's going to show signs of infidelity and leave me worrying. It's just not something that I want. And I love you dearly, but this is more than I want. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your moving on. You have every right, because part of the deal for being a sex addict is, and this is in your question, he's been hiding this from you. You said he's a sex addict. He's in recovery only 4 months. He cheated once and you thought it was a one-time slip, but then it happened again. And then he admitted he cheated on every partner he's ever been with. So, and the truth is you don't know how much he's cheated on you because you don't know what's true or not. You only know what he's telling you, and he lies to everyone he gets involved with. So I think these are very meaningful questions for you to be asking, and you don't have kids and you don't live together, or you don't have a house together. The couples I see stay together, they have histories together, they have lives together, they have so much going on that has happened over time that in the scheme of their relationship, the sexual acting out is a big piece, and in the moment it's a very painful piece, but it's not that there's so much more that they share, and they want that, and they want to work toward that, and they've liked it. There are other people who say, I love you, but not enough to spend the rest of my life doing this. And you know what? Both are right. You have every right to say, I don't think I want to do this, even if it's going to be painful for you. And it will be. Separation is always painful. But I also respect, as a recovering sex addict who wants a partner who will stay with me, I also completely respect if that doesn't work for you. And if you've been in a relationship for 6 years and you're still seeing lying and you're still seeing secrecy and you're still seeing hiding, and he's been 4 months in a recovery and it's just, well, let me back up and say this, sorry. 4 months is not a very long time. You've spent 60 years together. If it were me, I would put maybe the relationship in a safe harbor, maybe say for 6 months or so, I'm not going to make any decisions about the relationship, but I'm also not going to have sex with him because I don't know who he's been with or what he's been doing, and I don't feel safe. And we're just going to be in therapy and working on ourselves. And since it's only been 4 months and he has this long history, and since he does seem to be telling me more and more, I can let myself be a little hopeful about that, but not certain if we're going to go forward at all. I just want to wait and see. In other words, how about you don't make a decision? How about that? But you make a decision to wait 6 months. You've had 6 years. So why not put in 6 more months? Because the truth is, and this is true, we do tend to meet people who have similar issues to us. And if I have some issues, I'm not saying you're going to meet another sex addict, but you probably will meet someone who has a few emotional issues. And if you think they're likely to turn out to be the same as this person or similar, but you can tolerate this guy, I would say hang out with this guy, because if he's willing to be honest, if he's willing to heal, if he's willing to work on it. Because I'm always going to find someone who has some stuff going on. I have stuff going on, but I want to find someone who has stuff going on in dating, who's also in therapy, who's also in 12-step program. And this is how I talk to some of you folks on who come and ask questions, will often say, like, I don't want to date anymore or be sexual anymore with anybody because I've had so many horrible experiences, I just want to give up. And to you, I want to say, you can make better choices, next time, and we can help. And if you don't have to make those choices by yourself, a lot of people can support you. So, it isn't true that you're necessarily going to marry or meet the same person again, but it is true that if you're vulnerable to meeting or getting involved with people who have issues, and some of us just know that about ourselves, then make sure the person you're involved with is in therapy, in 12-step program, working on themselves and committed to the process. And the thing is, with your guy right now, you're not sure. It's only 4 months. He seems committed, but not fully. Why don't you wait a while? Put it all on hold. Take care of yourself and see what it looks like in August. But protect yourself. Don't be vulnerable to someone who's just in early recovery. You may end up getting hurt more.
And you didn't mention, you said he's in therapy, but Dr. Rob just mentioned you get support. I would highly encourage you to make sure that you're getting support. I don't know if there's been a formal disclosure, but 4 months would be kind of around the time that you might consider that. And so you need to have support so that can be the most helpful and least traumatic aspect of that. But, you do want to, he just mentioned that you don't know all the truth. Well, that's what therapeutic disclosure is for. So
I also want to say something about, you were talking about disclosure, or about why partners need to be in treatment. So I want you to know that I don't support the idea of codependency. I don't really believe that you guys were destined to marry this broken person or you drive their addiction. I think like you said, this person probably had this problem before they met you and they hid it from you, and now it's starting to come out and you're seeing it, but they had it before. So many spouses will blame themselves or think they have a part in what's happened. Trust me, this person would have acted out with anyone they were with because this is what they do when they're feeling emotionally stressed or overwhelmed, and they would have done it with anybody. So it isn't about you. And it affects you and it hurts you. And we need to pay attention to that, but we don't do it because of you. And it's really important. I want to say to every spouse in this room, I really want you to hear me. I try to say this as often as I can. There is nothing that you as my wife or my husband or lover can ever do, ever, to make me go have sex with another person. When I decide that I want to act out, when I say screw my beliefs, fuck it, forget it, I'm just going to do what I want to do, I am making that decision by myself. And whether you have sex with me or you don't, whether you gain weight or you don't, whether you're angry at me or you're not, has nothing to do with my decision to have sex. A lot of sex addicts think, well, if I'm in an unhappy relationship, the only alternative is to go have sex with other people. Well, how about counseling? Well, how about taking up a hobby? Well, how about there are many things you can do if you're not happy in a relationship other than have an affair. Unfortunately, if you're a sex addict and you're the least bit unhappy or looking for an excuse, your spouse is the greatest reason to run because your spouse is too fat, too thin, too this, too that. And I'm here to tell you, spouses, that you have nothing to do with it. We're going to do it so why do you need help? Why do you need to be in therapy? Well, guess what? Because you live with us. And we would make anybody crazy. We lie to you. We manipulate you. We keep secrets. We tell you that black is white and white is black. We twist your thinking. We try to hide our secrets. We make the people we're with crazy. And then you spouses, end up being people that you don't want to be. I hear spouses saying to me all the time, oh, I've ended up being this nagging, controlling. I'm not this person. I just read a letter today. One of the things we do in treatment, in therapy, when we're working with people, is I ask spouses to write a letter of their experience. And I just read a letter from a spouse today. And, it was very clear to me that there was a lot of love there. There was a lot of support there. There was a lot of hurt there. And that she lost her best friend. She lost the person she knew had her back, but didn't. And not only did she lose her best friend, but she realized that her best friend, who she thought would have her back, was actually the one who was out there doing things that were actively hurting her. So just that the person you're close to, the person who is your world, the person that you believe in and is out there hurting you, I'd run to therapy just for that, not to mention what we go through. So you're going to therapy when we are acting out, or us addicts are active in our addiction, is not about you're going to therapy because you're part of the problem. It's you're going to therapy so you can have some peace of mind and get support while you're dealing with living with a crazy person, because addicts are crazy people and we will drag you into the craziness right along with us. I think I'm done now.
Okay.
What do we
And
got?
I always talk about it, support for the partners. And so, yeah.
Yes.
So, okay. My husband, soon to be ex, is an SA. My daughter and I are in a domestic violence shelter because of his addiction. While he needs to work on things, do you find it common that partners have a co-addiction of SA and not be aware? I am wondering if that's why I stayed for 10 years. I can see that I am craving intimacy and can easily confuse the intensity for intimacy. Am I needing to take more responsibility for everything that happened?
Okay. Well, I don't quite understand, and maybe you can help me, Tammy, because it sounds like this person's looking at domestic violence as being like an addictive process, or what does that mean exactly?
Well, I was thinking you could start off because sex addiction is not domestic violence. So,
So I can tell you that in 25 years of doing this work, I can think of maybe 5 or 10 men out of hundreds that I've worked with who were abusive physically to their spouses. And it is a whole separate issue. It may play into his insecurities or his whatever his brokenness is, and the stem of his addiction and his hurting you may be the same. But domestic violence has to be handled fully and completely in a domestic violence environment with other men who hit. His SA issues, while important, are not going to help him learn how to tolerate and manage his anger and work with you and your child so that no harm happens to you. And so I do see people with co-occurring addictions. One of the things we treat in California is drugs and sex. We have a lot of people coming in who can't get sober on drugs because of their sexual behavior. They can't stay sober on sex because of their drug issues. It just all blends together. But domestic violence isn't really considered an addiction. It is an intensity-based cycle of behavior that goes round and round and round like an addiction cycle. But it's not the same thing. It doesn't come from necessarily the same place. And in my experience, and my belief as a therapist, he needs to go to SA, he needs to work on those issues and get sponsored and all that, and he needs to go to domestic violence counseling and get work done on anger management so that he learns how to negotiate trying to love you without hurting you.
So then talk about, is it common for partners to have co-addiction of SA and not be aware?
Partners to have co-addiction
So
of SA.
So she says her husband is an SA. So
Right.
could she have a co-addiction of SA and not be aware of it? I think it's because she's confusing the intensity and intimacy.
So let me try this.
Okay.
If you live in a lot of deprivation or you with a lot of inconsistencies, it's not, we'll take whatever we can get in terms of attention. I know kids who will be bad, so they get hit, so someone pays attention to them. And I don't think that's what a spouse does, but I do know that any attention feels like attention. And if you're attention starved, then even getting hit feels better than being left alone completely. So if that's what you're asking, something about your emptiness, your loneliness, you're not getting your needs met. You're not getting them met in two different places. One in terms of his warmth and kindness if he's hurting you, and also in terms of his intimacy and relationship if he's acting out sexually. But here's how I would tie it together for you. Spouses who experience domestic violence, often, even if they start out with relatively high self-esteem, they begin to lose it over time. Because if you're a battered spouse, you begin to believe that maybe you deserve it, or maybe you don't deserve better, or maybe that's all you're going to get. And the person who's battering is often saying those things to you, like, you're lucky I'm staying around, no less hitting you, and so there's a lot of devaluing and demeaning that goes into hurting a spouse that's beyond the physical. It is typical for spouses who experience sex addiction in a partner to also have some hopelessness, some low self-esteem, and some issues of their own. So could you be someone who tolerates both of these things in the person you love because you have your own vulnerabilities? Sure. Could those things in you be related? Sure. In other words, if you were feeling stronger and more loving of yourself, might you stand up yourself to both? Maybe. But I'm just so proud of you, by the way. I just want to say, I don't know who you are, I don't know where you are, but you left home. You took your child and you went somewhere safe. And I just want to say I have so much love for you for that. Because his problems don't matter a hill of beans compared to that child that you have with you. And they need your safety, your support, your nurturing, no matter what he's doing. And I'm so glad that you are keeping you and your child safe.
So the last piece of it, am I needing to take more responsibility for everything that happened?
No.
Thank you.
No spouse is ever responsible ever for an addict acting out, and no spouse or friend or partner is ever responsible for being hit. There is nothing you can do to make that happen except not protect yourself well enough.
So rather than taking responsibility, my thought was I'd love to see you take care of yourself in that you find support for dealing with this. I can only imagine how traumatic this is for you, and how Rob was talking about the neglect and deficits of intimacy. That I think you deserve some support for that. Would love again for you to join the drop-in groups on this. It's all free, but there's if you need a name of a qualified therapist, contact me. So.
Hey Tammy.
Yeah.
I see a great question.
Well, there's a whole bunch of great questions.
I know, but I want you to ask this one next.
Okay.
It's the one at 537 from someone, the initials AS.
Oh, there you go. As a clinician, I'm often asked, what does a normal sex life look like? I have no idea. My spouse partner was an addict, and now we're looking to establish real intimacy and healthy sexuality. What is normal? How often per week, etc.? Well,
first of all, there is no normal. I'm so sorry to tell you, because everybody's different. So when we use words like normal, and I'm not trying to correct you, but we can so quickly get into judgment. I'm not this or I'm not that, so I'm not normal. I would use the word healthy. And if you use it, how frequently is sex healthy for most couples to have? Or how often do most healthy couples have sex? I like that better, because that allows a lot of variation for what is considered healthy. And I can tell you that there are couples that don't have sex. There are couples that spend their lives together and they're asexual. And all the research basically says is that couples who have been sexual but have stopped being sexual are not as empathic when they're fighting and don't always have each other's backs in the same way. But other than that, there doesn't seem to be a lot of difference between loving couples who have a lot of sex and loving couples who don't. So there is no rule. There is no rule. You can have a lot of sex. You can have not a lot of sex. You can feel like having sex and he might not. I mean, it's all about negotiation. It's all about the relationship, the intimacy, and what works for the two of you. And most of all, it's about trusting yourself that you are comfortable taking steps towards sexuality with him and you feel safe. And how often do you feel safe? How often do you feel loving? How often do you feel invited into sexuality? I think that's more of a question than how often is healthy or normal. There is no normal. There are couples that have sex 3 times a week until they're 90, and there are couples that stop having sex when they're 35 and never have it again, and they're just as happy. So it's really about what is healthy for you, healthy for him, and healthy for the two of you together. And I will say this also, though. There are couples that have uneven sexual drives. I've been with women who want to have a lot more sex than their husbands did. I've worked with men who want to. And the answer to that is, often maybe you don't feel like being sexual when he does, but could you hold him? Could he masturbate with you? Could you be with him while he's being sexual, or could he be with you? Not everyone feels like having sex all the time, but does that mean that your partner has to go off to another room and masturbate? Could they be with you and be sexual without actually having sex with you? So that way, if he wants to have sex 3 times a week and you want to have sex twice a week, that 3rd time, maybe you're just holding him, but you're together. It's connected, it's connecting, and it's not sort of running off and doing something by myself that you don't know about. I don't have a normal answer for you as much as I want to, but I will say this. You don't need sex to have intimacy. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be sexual, but you ask it in terms of the question, how do we achieve real sexuality and intimacy? They're different things. Intimacy has to do with being known and trust and feeling safe. And, my husband I have no secrets in my relationship, none. There's not a thing he doesn't know about me. And that's very intimate. And if I had something come up, like, I don't know, I got a parking ticket or something I didn't want to tell him, I'd go home and tell him, because that way I'm more, now he might be angry at me, and he often is, like, why did you get another parking ticket? But but I'm not going to not tell him because I'm afraid of his anger. To not tell him is to be non-intimate. So intimacy is not defined by sex. It's not defined by physicality, although can do things physically that are intimate. We can also be very sexual with people with whom we're non-intimate because we don't know them. The most intimate thing is to be completely, this is one of the reasons disclosure is useful for couples. When I am completely allow myself to be known to you, all the things I think you would hate me for, all the things I think you wouldn't love me for, all the things I think I deserve rejection for, and I find out that you actually want to be with me anyway, well, that's incredibly intimate and vulnerable. And a lot of my clients as active addicts want to hide the parts of themselves that they think you won't like and only bring in the parts that you will. I was sitting with a gentleman in treatment the other day, and he had really spent years telling his spouse that he was this person, but then she started seeing this person, and she's like, who's that? I don't know him. Non-intimate, because he only showed her the parts that he thought she would love and not reject him for. When there were parts that he thought he might not be winning, he just kept them from her. And that is a non-intimate relationship because he is trying to be what he thinks you want him to be rather than just being who he is. Intimacy is about being known, not about sex.
So I'm going to switch over to the chat. What else seems to be the keys to success for couples that stay together? We read a lot about couples that grow stronger through the trauma. It's honestly hard to imagine how, or even with therapy, support groups, etc., how do couples get past the betrayal?
Somehow I think it's a woman asking that question.
It is.
So I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse, which is about, it's ostensibly a book about how men can heal a cheating relationship with a woman when they have cheated on her. And the reason I wrote the book is it's been my experience that most men are not really aware of the depth of harm and hurt that we cause a female partner when we cheat. And therefore, after 90 days or 6 months, we're like, aren't you over it yet? Why am I having that unhappy face? Don't you believe in me? So what if I'm 10 minutes late? It's not like I'm cheating again. And we just expect you to get over it. And knowing that men like to fix things, we do, and solve things, we do, I assume that men would be able to solve the problem of having cheated on a woman. And the reality is we're not very good at it. We think that you should be over it far earlier than you are. So I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse to do two things. One, to validate for the woman who's hurting that you have every right to hurt, and you need to hurt as long as you need to hurt. And if it's a year or longer, that's perfectly fine, because you've really been abused in this situation and taken advantage of. And you're not going to be feeling trusting, loving, and supportive for a while, nor should you be. Your job is to feel your feelings and decide if you want to be with this person. So I wrote this book for women to read and say, yeah, that's how I feel, and throw it at the man they're with, because men don't get it. That's why I wrote Out of the Doghouse. So I think this relates to your question, I think, because, let me see. Success for couples staying together. Thank you. So if you listen to that podcast that I did with Stan Tatkin, and I think what I'm about to say is true for all couples, but it's especially true for addicted couples, especially in the case of the addict. Dr. Tatkin says, all of us do better in relationships. That's true. We're healthier, we live longer lives, we're happier. And therefore, if you think about it, as members of this relationship, you and me, our highest priority should be to protect the relationship. When I think about sleeping with someone else, I think, well, wait a minute, that's not good for the relationship. And when I think about lying to you, I think, well, is that good for the relationship? And when you think about whether you want to begin to forgive me or not, you got to think, well, can I be whole with that? Can I stick with that? And is that good for the relationship? Because, and here's the other thing I love that Dr. Tatkin says about relationships. He says, even though we are happiest in relationship, and our highest goal should be to protect the relationship because we're happier and healthier within it, human beings are inherently selfish. And when in relationships, we often end up with, well, what about me? Well, what about me? Well, what about me? And that gets really highlighted when there's been betrayal and hurt. The me and the not me and the what you did and what you haven't done, and it becomes really big, as it should be, because you're questioning trust. But what I want to say to you is simply this, and I don't mean to suggest that you should or shouldn't stay with your person, but I will say We are happier in relationships. We live longer in relationships. Happy relationships, by the way. If you have the potential for a happy relationship, or your relationship has been happy and you think it might be happy again, hold on to it. They're hard to find. One of the issues I have with the whole idea of codependency is I think it did far too little to keep couples together. Then when looking at drug addiction, alcoholism, there's a lot about detachment, about separation, about doing your own thing and letting them struggle. I don't believe in those things. I think we're partners for a reason, and we need to support each other. So I think what you need to think about is, at least what I would be thinking about with this question is, have I had real love with this person? And do I believe it's achievable again? And have I had trust at times? And do I believe in him? Do they believe in me? Do we have fun together? Because even though you can't see past the betrayal, I will tell you that there is so much more to a relationship than whether that person's been faithful to you or not. That doesn't mean it's okay for him to not have been faithful or hurt your trust. But it also doesn't mean that there isn't a whole lot there worth fighting for. And I can't answer that question for you. Only you can answer that.
We've got 3 more really good things. We'll see how we could do. So one is, what is meant by the intensity in the case of SAs? Is it the pursuit of the high?
So sex addicts pursue intensity rather than intimacy. It's because we are almost to a one afraid or have trouble tolerating close intimacy. So we often walk around in the world, even when we have a close partner, feeling kind of empty inside because we haven't fully let our partners know who we are, non-intimate, and we're walking around feeling empty. And so all this crazy stuff we do in the world is really just the sexual behavior, an attempt to feel better, feel connected, feel desired, feel important. There are goals for all of that. That's why we do it. And Tammy, what's the other half of that question I need to answer?
Is it the pursuit of the high?
It's more a pursuit of escape. It's more a pursuit of being able, you know what sex addiction really is? It's about control. It's about, I feel out of control when I'm close to you because oftentimes, I'm someone who's been hurt in the past and maybe in the very distant past, but I learned somewhere along the way not to trust intimacy, not to trust closeness, not to trust deep connection because that can hurt me. But we all long for deep connection. We all long for deep relationship. And so a lot of sex addicts will find non-intimate relationships meaningful and try to make them work as long as possible while hiding what was really going on with them at the same time. And yeah, still don't know if I've answered that question, but I keep talking round and round it.
So let's go to the next one. I can't quite see a hopeful future. I feel that I've been looking into recovery, or I feel that looking into recovery feels like a fantasy that will not happen, i.e. finding someone that loves me after high school and college, or shutting people out, feeling unwanted by everyone, even as a tourist in a new city. 12-step groups say live day by day, but I can't quite find how today starting will be different.
So is this someone who feels that they've been a second love addict and they feel that if they really want intimacy, they'll never find it? Is that
if this one feels, I don't see a hopeful future. So it doesn't feel... So this one, I'm wondering, like, if they've been tested for depression. That was where I thought.
Well,
so,
first of all, I mean, what are you doing in your 12-step program? If you have a sponsor, if you're spending a couple of nights a week in meetings, if you're checking in with people at least a few days a week, if you're in therapy, if you have a whole bunch of connection and support going around, you shouldn't feel helpless, because the people around you should be able to carry the hope for you when you don't feel you can carry it. That's one of the things that happens in those rooms, is that there are people in those rooms when I'm feeling completely hopeless who talk to me about hope. And, as someone who has been completely hopeless about relationship and sexuality and now has been married very happily for 18 years, I can tell you that I didn't have hope either until I found it. So, I would suggest to you that the hope can be found by finding love in the people around you who are supporting you and nurturing you. And if you start to feel that love and connection, you should have some hope for other kinds of love and connection. But if, as Tammy said, you're walking around in the dark all the time, in shadow light, and you feel awful all the time and hopeless around ever being loved, it could be a form of depression. Those of us who have those feelings, that's what depression feels like. So never it's always a good idea to go see a therapist and get checked out and see if that could be going on, because sometimes we feel so guilty and responsible about our problems that we don't even feel we deserve to feel better. And you do deserve to feel better.
Okay. And then
Last question.
I know. So my partner and I just moved in together after 8 months dating. I'm a love addict, been working the program 5 years, left an abusive relationship 17 months ago, did a dating plan, ideal qualities, steps, etc. As soon as we moved in together, we started fighting constantly. We talked through and wrote out what our needs were and the differences are before moving in. How do I know what a healthy amount of conflict is? How do I know when to stay or when to go? How do I maintain healthy relationship once I found the groundwork for dating plan, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Got
I'm
it?
going to give you my best direction on this because someone else gave it to me. If you're with someone and things aren't going well and you're not sure if it's a good relationship or not, and you're thinking, I really like some parts of it, but I'm not sure I like other parts, and is this a viable relationship? Here's what you can change and here's what you can't. I think this is worth saying. So things you can work on in a relationship: honesty, communication, listening, empathy, intimacy, sexuality. In other words, how you treat each other and how you interact and how you listen to each other and respond to each other. And those are all things you can work on. And therapy is a wonderful way to work on all of that stuff, a good couples therapist. But who that person is, what they believe, how they look at the world, how they look at other people, how often they judge, whether they're conservative or liberal, or those are things that really are who the person is. So you can fight. It makes sense if you're fighting about not feeling heard, not feeling understood, not feeling listened to, and those are things you can work on. But if you're fighting about the basic sense of what you each believe or who that other person is, those things aren't going to change. If you feel this is someone whose beliefs and the way they look at life is never going to be something you can buy into, then you're with the wrong person. Because you can change how you communicate, you can change how you listen to each other, you can change how you treat each other, but you can't change who that person is, and you're not going to change who you are. And ultimately, you're either two people who value, appreciate, and enjoy each other, or you're not.
On that note, yes, exactly. We ran out of time. There were a couple that didn't get answered. I'm sorry, but join us again next week. And please do join the drop-in groups. Angela Spearman asked one of the questions, and she hosts the partner drop-in group on Sunday evenings at 6 p.m. But there's lots of other choices, male partner groups, etc. So.
And I just want to say one more thing. For those of you who are looking for treatment, good treatment is not easy to find, and we are doing extraordinary work. And I'm actually running the work, which I don't do forever. I'm going to be running it until I get the therapist trained, and then hopefully I won't have to. I'm doing work that I've been doing for 25 years, so I'd like to pass it on. But for right now, I'm actually doing the work. So if you do feel that treatment is useful for you, let Tammy know or write us through Seeking Integrity or Sex and Relationship Healing, and we'll either guide you towards someone out there, or, you can come see us here. I just want you to get well. Thank you.
Agree. Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Rob.
Have a great night, folks. Bye for now.
Bye.